wrecking yard. I met my true love down in the wrecking yard. I met my true love called a wreck Chevrolet, which I see every day.
Obligations, but you'd rather not go. There's nothing to do, you're bored out of your mind. You're so sick of working at the same daily grind. Pay close attention, you'll eventually find that your teacher. That's your teacher. You wished you had thought of to say. You're just a protege. That's your teacher. That's your teacher. What you don't wanna hear.
Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of The Wrecking Yard. My name is Tony, I'm still the head cheese around here, and this episode is something very special. This podcast takes place last September, where me and the Wrecking Yard intern, Nashville, Woody, paid a visit to Tim Carroll. Tim Carroll, who I've known for going on 4 decades now, from back when I used to schlep equipment for the Gizmos. He then went on to form the Blue Chieftains, and since then, he's enjoyed a very successful career as a singer-songwriter in Nashville. His songs have been covered by a bunch of people. He's placed some songs in some movies and TV shows, and you'll find out about all of this and a lot more. This will probably be of particular interest to fans of the Gizmos because in this one you get sort of a different perspective as to the Gizmos and what happened to them and how it happened and whatnot. And it's not a lot of horrible dirt or anything, but it's interesting to get it from another perspective. Before I sign off here, I need to make a request to anyone that's listening who might know ex-Gizmos drummer Larry Crash Kinzer. Now, nobody's mad at him. Nobody wants to yell at him. Everything is, water under the bridge. I really would like to talk to him for about 5 or 10 minutes just to find out his viewpoint and also to get a handle on what must be the most rock and roll ninja skills of all time. You'll know why after you listen to the podcast. It was a great day. And right after the show, me and Nashville Woody went to see Marty Stewart at the Country Music Hall of Fame for his psychedelic jamboree, which featured Roger McGuinn and Chris Hillman and a ton of other people. And I have to say it was one of the best shows I've ever seen. And now I take you to Tim's dining room.
If you want the whole damn truth and you can't stand one more lie, get me high. 'Cause I tell you everything, you won't have to cry. Get me high. Get me high, won't need another thing. Get me high and I'll have your praise to sing.
What to tell you is I finally just last week got around to listening to your new one, the one that Phil reviewed. Holy shit, dude!
I wanted to make sure and give you
that
some
is
things.
a great record.
One?
Yes.
Okay.
I listened to it off of Amazon, and when I heard That's Your Teacher, I was like going, dude, that could have been on Martha Hoople's Mad Shadows.
Cool, man. That's one of my favorite ones. Really, I like that song.
But the thing I noticed is that I'm not going to say that it sounds angry, but man, you sound like fed up on that record. Is there anything behind that?
Well, you know.
It's not your divorce record, is it?
I don't think so, but it could be. I'm living a divorced life right now.
Right.
It's been 5 years, but I'm still kind of like trying to, get past all of the little. I'm still all the time thinking of shit, going, damn it.
I have two friends right now who both separate of each other told me, if I ever get married again, just hit me in the face. Okay? And they both proposed to somebody at the same time last week without knowing each other.
You got to punch them in the face.
Well, I told them. I said, and one of them said, like, go ahead.
If you don't mind interrupting, do you mind if I take a couple pictures during the interview?
I don't mind. My hair's all wet, and I was thinking, if they're going to take any pictures, I wonder if I should wear a button-down shirt. And stuff.
It doesn't matter. It's pretty casual. Would you like to enjoy a little of this?
Yeah, I'll take a little hit of it.
Push the button and go to town.
I don't know. I don't have every technology going in the world, and I think I probably was not able to ever hear your podcast because I didn't get the app or whatever it takes, and I'm remiss there. But
well, they're all over the place. You can go to YouTube and just listen to it while looking at the same logo for 2 hours. And they're on a couple other sites, and you can get them off iTunes. I actually got them on.
I'll go to YouTube. That's where I go all the time for everything.
It's easiest.
So I should have already done that, but I didn't.
So I thought you would have listened to the Dale one, because there is one question I'm going to ask you that I asked Dale.
I wondered if you were just simply here to find out if Dale ever tells you the truth about things.
Oh, I think he told me the truth. But the one question I had, and I'll go ahead and ask it early, but we're going to hit this later on, is when moving drums is noisy. Okay?
I know what you're going to say.
And I asked Dale, how did Crash leave in the middle of the night?
I agree.
Without waking anybody up?
These are the things that keep me laying awake at night. I have asked myself that even recently. Get this. I was sleeping by the door.
Oh!
On the couch. I guess we were probably drinking the night before. So that might have helped me be a little knocked out. But damn, it was like I was sleeping on that couch and my head was at that end and there was the door. And he got a fucking drum kit out downstairs. I don't know.
Without waking. Now Billy, I can understand, because I seem to remember he slept like a log. But Dale, he's usually fairly aware of his surroundings and
all these. It was like a shotgun thing where you had to walk through every room, and so maybe the room Dale was in, he didn't have to walk through, but he had to walk through every other room, and I don't know how that happened. And I would also, I don't know if I really want to ask him all this, but I've always wondered, then what did he do? Did a friend drive from Indiana and meet him right outside our door?
Right, because he didn't have a car, right?
Did he somehow take a taxi to Port Authority and load him on a bus? No, that doesn't sound right. It's almost like somebody from Indiana must have driven up.
I should track him down and just say, hey, look, I don't need much.
Tell us what happened this one night.
I just need a couple questions here.
One night. What happened?
Oh. What's his real name?
Larry Kinzer.
Okay. All right. When I get home, I'm going to make a point to see if I can't find him.
I think that he may still live in Spencer, Indiana, which is on the way to Terre Haute from Bloomington.
I wouldn't need to find him. I could just call him and just ask him. I'm going, look, dude, you're kind of legendary, and I don't think you know why. Because look, I used to play drums. You can't
move them silently.
You cannot even undo one of the toms from the bass drum quietly.
Can you imagine walking with a snare and it's going? And then you bump into things and you're like,
Dale didn't have an answer either.
Fascinating to think about it. Yeah. Some kind of technological genius. He was able to do this.
I wonder if he beamed him out. I don't know, but that's when Dale first told me this story a long time ago, that was the first thing I asked him. I said, well, Dale, how did he move the drum set out without waking everybody up? And he's like, I
think it surprised me at the time, but over the years, it's gotten, in my mind, it's gotten even bigger. It's like, how did he get right by me?
Yeah.
I didn't hear a thing. I guess if I had, we would all kind of gone nuts because it threw a real wrench into our plan.
Yeah, I know.
As it turned out, or whatever, if you want to go.
If I'd been a decent drummer, I would have moved out there, but Dale will tell you I'm not a decent drummer. When I for that short period of time when I was playing with right to left, I was trying my hardest. And
it's hard to do.
And Dale would go okay, on this part, I need you to go chung 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 chung, and I'm like, shit, Dale, usually I just go da 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 bang.
Yeah.
He's like, no, that's not what we need. And I'm like going, oh. And that's why I eventually kind of bowed out, because I knew I wasn't doing it right, and I knew he was being polite, and I knew also he was desperate for a drummer, and that was the only reason it was me. And finally, he found somebody else.
You sort of work with what you have.
Yeah, that's exactly. Although when I was living in Germany and they came out, he let me play on a song for the encore, and I fucked it up. I think it was Pay. He let me do Pay there at the end, and I just.
That was kind of tricky because it's like da da.
Yes,
da,
he
da,
picked
da.
the picky one for me.
That is a weird one. Yeah.
He might have just been messing with me, He's like,
he probably just didn't plan that too well.
Yeah, let's show I bet he's been bragging about being a drummer. Let's show all these Germans how shitty
we'll
he
put
is
that
at it.
To rest. Yeah.
Yes. That was really weird too, because for the short time I lived in Germany, both him and the Zero Boys both came and toured in the town I was in,
wow.
which is like a little town that nobody ever.
From Bloomington to there,
yeah. Both of them. One came the first year I was there, and one came the second year. It was fun. I actually rode with them to Regensburg, which is like an hour and a half later, and they were getting good crowds, and people were like really enthusiastic.
I can see that.
I didn't think that they had spread quite that far, but I always forget that Europe is a different animal.
Yeah,
it really is. And anybody who's an old blues or soul guy will tell you that. Yeah, I got to work washing dishes here, but I go over there and I'm a king.
They're not subject to the same hype machine as we are. So the people that are gigantic stars here, who dwarf the rest of us, it's a little more even when you get over there. Or at least that's how it's been in certain places where they didn't realize that this guy is 1,000 times more famous than you. Mm-hmm. They were just like, yeah, check out this record and this record, and it was just kind of like you were just a little more equal.
Right.
And then, yeah.
So are you playing anywhere tomorrow or Friday?
Yeah. Yes, I'm playing tonight, just playing guitar with a woman who in a little band down at the 5 Spot.
Okay, well that we can't do, but we can do tomorrow or
that's right. Your show is
tonight's the McGuinn.
Tomorrow I do a solo thing on Thursdays, outdoors at this Drifter's Barbecue.
I've seen pictures from you before.
I just sit there playing my songs for a long time.
All right.
Longer than you'd probably sit there, but you can eat there, and anyway, there's that. And then on Friday, it's a little cooler. I play with my band every Friday at this place, the 5 Spot down here in East Nashville.
Right. Yeah, I've seen pictures of you there too.
And that is from 6 to 8:30.
Yeah, that might be basically whichever. I'm still waiting for Chuck Mead to get back with me. Mm-hmm. So whatever time I don't have him, that's when we'll show up.
Okay.
So all right, cool.
He lives sort of.
I was hoping to be playing here while we were here.
Sort of by the 5 Spot. Sometimes he comes to that gig.
Everyone keeps telling me he's really, really friendly and fun to talk to.
Oh yeah, he's very personable guy.
And he seems to, because I usually don't expect anyone I don't already know to say yes. And so far I've been really lucky. I tried to get a hold of Hans Rottenberry, but he doesn't live in Nashville apparently. He lives outside.
Is that the guy
Nashville.
From the Shazam?
Shazam, yeah.
Okay.
And I know I think they just officially broke up just recently because their drummer died a couple months ago. I think. But anyway,
I think you're right about this. Yeah,
he has an intermediary.
I don't know all those guys, but one guy that played in that band was Jeremy Asbrock, and he may have been like one of the later guitar players or something, but he still lives here. But those other guys, I think you.
Yeah, his intermediary said that she would pass the message along, but I never heard anything after that.
I guess he's not around.
And I don't like to harass people. If they say no, that's cool. I understand. So the one no I got, I've been okay with.
I was reminded, and this may not be something you wanted to talk about at all anyway in your podcast, but just since I was talking about, the Gizmos moving to Hoboken, and then when Crash left after like a week or 5 days or whatever it was.
It was that short a time?
Yeah, it was like a week. I always think of it as a week. I always tell people.
Oh, I thought he was there for like months and months and just got downtrodden and was I can't do this anymore.
No, it happened real quick.
Wow.
And so we were so surprised by it. All of a sudden, it was our new reality, But and so there's some stories I could tell about that process of getting a new drummer too. But
we'll get there.
Okay. But moving there was not necessarily like a great idea to do,
right.
Because I only realized recently, and I mentioned it to Dale. I was like, we put out a record, and like within 3 weeks we had moved away. It was at least it couldn't have been a month.
Right.
It might have been like 2 weeks later, And that was not smart, man. We should have stayed there. We're a band with an album out now. Get played on a little bit local radio.
Right.
Start working. Instead, we moved away,
And the Midwest was actually starting to cook up a little bit at the time.
Must have been.
And the East Coast was like, they had like bands out the ass.
It was, exactly. And the first wave of it that we had gotten so excited about was kind of over.
Right.
And it was evolving into other things. And you're right, lots of bands. So as soon as we got to New York, it was like, oh, this is where the clubs are, but it's where fucking billions of bands are already entrenched.
Yeah, you have to have like
and we lost
a switchblade to get a show. Because you got to cut 5 bands ahead of you in line.
Yeah. So
whereas if you stayed in Indy, you could have gone to Chicago one weekend, Cincinnati one weekend. I mean,
so all of that over the years has, of course, come back to me through my. But at the same, it made our band kind of crash and burn and break up and everything after a year, but as people, it pulled us along quite a bit.
Right.
So, it's a two-edged thing. I'm a little sorry that it made our band go bonkers, but somehow I guess that would have happened anyway, even if we'd stayed in Bloomington and never moved away.
Right.
And I've been afraid too that if we'd stayed in Bloomington, that somehow we'd have thought we were big fish, and not grown very much. I don't know,
Well, I think around the time you left was when like the Dancing Cigarettes were starting to get going.
Well, they were already
Garden.
They were already going, not Arson Garden, but when the Dancing Cigarettes were already kind of going. But yes, things picked up. There started to be a bunch of bands out of like people who had seen us and different things, and it just started picking up. And then also, no doubt, the in general, there was probably starting to be a little more people who had heard good punk music.
Right.
But early on, like it was very discouraged. Like I didn't even hear the cool music for a while because it had such a bad reputation.
Right.
Everyone would just say things like, "Oh, they can't even play. It's not even real music." And so it's like, well, you don't even get a chance to hear it. And it was like a couple of years before I really kind of heard punk rock, and I was like, oh, this is funner than hell.
Well, remember we did the documentary on the legendary Stardust Cowboys. So when someone tells me someone can't play, I'm all in.
Yeah, that's not the whole deal.
Yeah.
I know it because I've seen people who are not good players or singers, but who write interestingly, and vice versa. I see it all the time here where people are slick players and singers, and their writing is for shit, but they fool everyone.
Well, look at the Shags. I mean, they couldn't play for crap, but they got some great songs.
Yeah. Some of my favorite old records have real rough patches in them, and yet they're great. So let me not guide the subject matter.
That's fine. Go wherever.
No. Tell me how you wanted to. What you want to talk about?
Well, we can start at the beginning. Where are you from? Okay. Wait a minute. As this goes on,
Earth.
I'm going to ask you stuff that I already know.
Okay.
But I'll just be leading you into creating
to document it and to
exactly.
sort of confirm what you thought you knew.
Yeah, exactly.
And all that. Yeah.
So where are you from?
Earth.
Okay, come on, help me out here. Is it like Terre Haute?
Yes, Terre Haute, Indiana.
Okay.
I was born in Terre Haute, and then I grew up about 10 miles outside of Terre Haute in the country, kind of near the Illinois border.
Okay.
But in Indiana.
Now, what were you listening to when you were a kid? Do you remember like anything that hit you like the first time, where you were like, "Oh shit, this is music and I love it"? Well, for me, it was the Beatles, of course.
Yeah, that was early memories for me too. I was born in the end of 1959, and I was the youngest of 4 kids. So my older siblings all were experiencing music before I was.
Right.
My sister saw the Beatles when they came to Indianapolis in 1965.
Yeah, I know someone else that did too.
She had lots of records, singles, and albums as time went on. Singles early, and then it became albums. And I would go into her room and listen to all her records when she was gone, So now,
was she cool with that, or were you sneaking?
Both. Both. I was sneaking, but she wouldn't care if I listened to her records, And so I remember a lot of some records. I learned I still associate from going into my sister's room, like the Neil Young first couple albums and Led Zeppelin 2. I remember pulling that out and playing it. And just going, wow. And it was like the first time, like hard rock, just really great shit. But so, and then my brother, she was the oldest kid, and then my other brother was 2 years younger, so his records were a little different. He had a bunch of Dylan and the band and all kinds of things over the years. Then my other brother was like about 4 years younger than him, and that's where I first heard things like Mata Hoople and Humble Pie, I suppose. But then, and I was hearing radio back in the '60s. You were hearing radio, so I can remember hearing 8 Days a Week and She Loves You, yeah.
It was fun, wasn't it? You remember how fun it was?
Oh my God, yes, coming over that radio.
Yeah, we'd go to Grandma's house and we'd know that for an hour we're going to hear some like great stuff on the car stereo, because my parents were really young. My parents were 18 when they had me.
Wow.
So, so you know, I remember watching the Beatles and Ed Sullivan because my mom did. I remember
somehow
watching.
I missed that, but I had to.
I don't think it was the first time.
I had to
it was
go
one
to
of the
bed
later times.
when Ed Sullivan would start. It was my bedtime, and once in a while I could talk him into letting me stay up and see Topo Gigio.
So yeah, but well, my deal was like I said, I don't think it was the first time, because the first time I was only like maybe 1.5 or 2. But I think one of the times after that, I just remember wandering out into the living room. And my dad was working nights. My mom sitting on the couch watching Ed Sullivan, so she's probably lonely, you know. But it's such a vivid memory that I can even remember what I was wearing. I was wearing Huckleberry Hound pajamas with those plastic footy bottoms that go like.
I may have had some of those too.
Yeah, and I just remember, you know, sitting on the couch with
my mom. I like
mom.
Huckleberry Hound.
Oh yeah, we all did.
Yeah.
You're sitting, and I'm sitting with my mom, you know, which when you're 2 or 3 years old, that's great anyway. And then there's the Beatles, and I don't remember any specific thoughts, but I must have thought, what the fuck is this?
Looked
It's the
pretty
best
cool.
thing ever I've ever seen or heard, and I don't know what it is. And then my mom, she
How'd
had
these guys get so good?
Yeah. Why? How'd they get on that TV? And my mom had like, you know, Herman's Hermits, and she didn't go for the really hardcore stuff, but we had like Beatle albums, Herman's Hermits.
Yeah, my sister
Chad and Jeremy
had Herman's Hermits and
stuff like that.
probably Chad and Jeremy. Yeah, they all had like whatever the big things of the time. Like I remember my brother Danny had brought home the Al Cooper Super Sessions record, and I never see anybody with that record anymore. I don't think it's that good, but it was a big record at the time. It sold a lot. Yeah. So anything. One record that was like around, and I think of it now as a fairly big deal, looking back, was the soundtrack to Easy Rider.
Oh, sure.
Because I would have heard the Jimi Hendrix couple records, the Steppenwolf couple songs. I would have heard The Wait for the first time, probably.
Right.
That was
and Ballad of Easy Rider is easily one of the stronger later day Bird songs, because it gets a little thin around there.
Then when I was about 9 or 10, I started playing guitar, because my it was just with all that stuff going on, you could not get interested in guitar, I think. But also, and then my sister got interested in it. My dad borrowed a guitar and brought it home one day, and it was sitting there. He borrowed it from somebody that he worked with, whose son wasn't using it or something. And I remember touching that guitar, and it was kind of like I've been hooked ever since, almost. Mm-hmm. But my sister didn't ever learn to play it.
Now, did you take to it fairly easily? I mean,
it's been a long, slow process, and I'm still learning. But
you loved it right off the bat.
I did love it right off the bat,
right.
and yes. And by the time in the 6th grade, I was in a little band with 2 classmates, one who played drums and the other who played guitar also. And we had, as a trio, we played in front of the whole school one day, and then we played in front of like all the parents too, one night or something. 2 days consecutive in my mind is how I remember it. That we played these 2 days kind of in front of all, and that was my first gigging. But we would go over to the one kid's house, and his brother played guitar, and so he had an amp, and we would all kind of plug into the same amp.
That's actually a common story for people who were in bands in the 60s.
I bet, yeah, all plugging into the same amp, and some older brother had, I might have even been using the older brother's like electric guitar or something, because at first I wouldn't have had one. At that guy's house, I remember borrowing the Humble Pie Live at the Fillmore record from him, which I still like, and then
that was a huge record.
And then we would listen to Jimi Hendrix, like Band of Gypsies and stuff, and we would and Black Sabbath we were listening to at the time, James Gang, and those things were like seminal influences for me, because they were right when I was starting to play guitar, was starting to play in bands, and all those records I still like them.
Yeah, well that was a time too when a popular record didn't automatically mean that it was a shitty record.
That's right.
No, really, I mean, the 60s,
it was
early 70s.
It was a very creative, cool time in music, man. Shit was happening.
Yeah. Okay, Now everything you've mentioned so far, you haven't mentioned any country whatsoever.
Uh-huh.
Were your parents listening to country at all? Is this something, I assume this is maybe something you came to like later?
Yeah, mostly. But there was country music around a little. in the sense that, well, my parents were of the World War II generation.
Mm-hmm.
My parents were a little bit older. I think they were 35 when I was born. My mother was a little more into, back in her growing up years and stuff, she was into big band more, that kind of thing.
Right.
But on the radio, I remember hearing like a lot of Frank Sinatra and just kind of pop music of the day, you know, Burt Bacharach and.
Sure.
My dad was a little less like into music in a sensitive kind of way. He liked music, and he would get. He had some Johnny Cash records, and I liked them. Mm-hmm. And Johnny Cash had a TV show in like 1969. Of course,
we watched that. Sure,
and that appealed to everyone. I liked it. I was the littlest. My sister liked it, who was 10 years older. My parents liked it. Like that guy had appeal across the board.
But he also had good guests. I mean, you look at the people he had on that show, and he just had the who's who on
Yes, he did. And they really.
Wasn't like Bob Dylan showed up anytime someone asked.
The same with the Glenn Campbell show. People really did play and sing right in front of you.
Yeah, we watched that too.
And so they were great shows, you know. I mean, the shit was happening. You know, people like really great musicianship. So there was a lot of Johnny Cash. I remember it seemed like back then on the radio you would kind of hear the country and the rock on the same channel. Because
More so than later, yes.
I remember loving like Johnny Horton. In 1814, we took a little trip.
I'm a big
like
Johnny
that was
Horton
a big enough hit that I knew that when I was a little kid.
Yeah, that was a big time crossover hit. You know, because that and like Sink to Bismarck and North to Alaska, he had that historical angle.
Yeah, it's telling stories.
So even if it might be a bit too twangy for the top 40 radio, it still had an appeal that would make it jump.
But
over.
I would say that other than Johnny Cash, there was not a bunch of country music in my consciousness during those years, because rock and roll I think it was the peak of rock and roll, man, or it was a long peak. It was like a 20-year peak.
Oh yeah.
And it was an incredibly creative time, and rock and roll was so happening. The stuff, it was just different all the time. There'd be a new band, a new sound, and it was just taking the whole world with it.
Right.
You know, my head was very much into rock and roll, and I can remember commercials would come on TV. Like they'd be selling the Hank Williams greatest hits or something. You're cheating hard,
right.
And we might make fun of it or something, if any. And then also I can remember the Porter Wagner and Dolly Parton commercials that would come on and saying what they looked outrageous.
And laughed, yes.
Yeah, so you would kind of chuckle about it, right?
Yeah.
So I never was following country music, and I never came to really appreciate it until in the Gizmos and living with Dale. Dale would play, of course, Jerry Lee Lewis, but George Jones for the first time I started hearing him, and I was like, dang, this is really great.
Dale helped us all out. I don't know if you remember correctly, but he was the only person in the universe that had a playable copy of James Brown Live at the Apollo. He was if you wanted to hear that record, go to Dale's house, because he's the only one that's got one, because that was a big party record. On the weird off chance that we would get one used at the store, they were always in shit condition.
Because they get played like that.
They get played at parties and stuff all the time. Well, at my house, I had no country music at all other than Johnny Horton, because I had a couple of those Johnny Horton records. But that's because I was a history buff. That was mostly what I was into it for. But my mom actively made fun of country music. It wasn't just we didn't like it. My mom would make fun of it.
My parents did not do that. And I remember my mom, when I was still pretty young, my mom read like Loretta Lynn's autobiography. And my mom, who was not a big country music person, really liked her. She thought, what a kind of impressive person. You know, you might think she's not as smart as she is. You know, that kind of. Somewhere around the time I started playing guitar, I think I know why this happened. One of the early guitars that I got, my parents bought me or helped me buy or something. We got it from a guy at a music store in Terre Haute. And he told us that he played in a bluegrass band every Tuesday at the Pizza Hut, and we started going. And I loved it, and my parents really liked it. And so me and my mom and dad started going to that pretty often, like maybe every week for a while, probably.
Right.
That was a place where we were all like really digging on, you know, country music, bluegrass music. So I always had a connection with it, but like when I got to Bloomington, there were people that played that way, that played acoustically and bluegrass. There was kind of a bluegrass scene around there.
Well, yeah, Bean Blossom.
Right down the road. I could relate to that kind of music, but I was a lot more interested in electric guitar and rock and roll. And also my bluegrass is a real player's medium, and I wasn't a good enough player yet. I could have strummed the chords.
Right.
But even that I wouldn't have been as taught at as I can now.
Well, a lot of that stuff is like at Slayer speed.
Yeah.
And you're like going like, how is he playing a banjo that fast?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Well, I remember once. You remember those Columbia Record Club things? You know, buy 8 records.
Yeah.
My mom. I remember the day my mom was looking at the big thing with all the little pictures, and she
Trying
goes,
to find 8 records.
Yeah. And she goes, Narvel Phelps.
Yeah.
And she laughed about that for months.
The first time I ran across a Narvel Phelps record, you know, I was like 30 or something, and I was like, Narvel Phelps. Yeah, what a funny name.
I know. My mom just went nuts.
And he had a song called A Little Bit of Soap that I liked,
Yeah.
which I found out other people have done.
I was going to say there was a soul version of that.
Yeah, I think
it
a
was
lot
like
of people have done it.
Brooke Benton, I think maybe, or someone like that.
But then when I played years later, when I played with Sonny Burgess a lot, and he was from Arkansas, Narvel Phelps' name would come up in conversation once in a while. You know, I was like, oh my God, you know.
Good thing my mom wasn't there. But yeah, I lived in a house where country music did not exist except for the folly of my mother.
Yeah, so I didn't have much of it around either. The thing that got me into it, and the reason why I live in Nashville, I imagine, is when Gizmos had moved to Hoboken, and when we were needing a drummer, and we didn't have a drummer yet, we were auditioning people. One of the first guys that we auditioned somehow.
Should I use that coaster?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. And it's glass too. You can use it.
Oh, all right.
And, one of the first guys we auditioned came over to our apartment a couple of times and played with us, but he wasn't really the right guy. He wasn't like gnarly enough, and he was a nice guy, but somehow we could just sense that he didn't play down and dirty enough. But he told us one of the nights that we were there, that he was there. He said, "Oh yeah, some guys I know are playing down at Maxwell's tonight. They're called Rank and File." Well, it turned out it was the wrong Rank and File, that there was some Long Island band called that for a short time. Mm-hmm. But we went, just like Rick in Casablanca, we were misinformed. So we went down there to see this, and we saw the wrong band. But it was like the second gig ever of Rank and File.
Right.
And we were blown away because it was like punk rock dudes who decided to be a country band and who had a lot of onstage charm and stuff. And they had a really good drummer. And we were a punk band who had listened to country music quite a bit, but we had, I swear, never considered playing it. I never had, anyway, and I'm pretty sure Billy hadn't and everything.
Yeah.
And I think Dale hadn't even yet. But when we saw Rank and File, all of a sudden it was like click, and things shifted like that day. But I went up to Chip after the gig and I said, "Hey, we're this band. We've lost our drummer. Your drummer's great. Do you know of any other drummers?" And he said, "I do. I know a guy moving to town. Here's my phone number. He's going to be here in a few weeks or a month or something." And so I don't know. A couple weeks later, Billy and I were running around. I said, "Hey, let me call that guy from Rank and File." So we called him up, and he was there, and we hung out with him all day with Chip, and we went and saw a movie, and we did all kinds of things. He showed us where to buy pot and stuff. And
it's very important.
It was. It helped me out for like the next year. The fact that he did that. That drummer never did wind up moving to New York, but we got to know Rank and File, and we majorly admired them. We got pretty friendly with them, and we did a couple shows with them and stuff once we got a drummer.
Right.
But they are, I would say, responsible for getting me interested in the good country music and the old stuff. And
sure.
And that's when I became a fan of it. And I every time I'd get off the PATH train coming back from Manhattan, I'd stop in the record store in Hoboken and look through the racks and take home some Rounder reissue or something. And so they're the ones that hipped me really to like Jimmy Rogers and maybe Hank Williams, and I got real interested in the country roots of rock and roll and just country, and but not like the current, whatever was current.
Right. Well, I'm not sure that a lot of these bands realize it, but like Rank and File, BR549, the Beat Farmers, Jason and the Scorchers. I mean, that was the first country music that a lot of people that I know ever heard. Okay, and a lot of it, for me included. You know, I mean, that first, I don't want to use this word cowpunk, but that first wave of cowpunk kind of, like you said, kind of opened your eyes and you're like going, well, shit, this is fast and it's hard and it's
they're
hard
hip.
hitting.
It's like they're
but
hip.
It's also twangy.
Yeah, they know cool music and they're doing this. What you don't like is when you see dudes who don't even know the cool stuff. I mean, you know, they were just hip dudes doing this, and they brought that awareness to the situation, and all of a sudden it broadened it, you know, and made it very interesting to a music nut who, and especially a person who had been quote unquote woke to punk rock. Punk rock was one of those things. It was like this woke moment where when you heard it, you were like, oh, forget about 80% of everything I've known till now.
That's exactly
because that is stupid. I'm now realizing it was a real awakening. Punk rock was, and it was only kind of the hipper people that were really interested deeply that could find their way to it.
Right.
It was so suppressed by the mainstream and the record labels. I now realize spent like not a dime on promoting punk rock and new wave, and that's why one of the reasons it failed. I always thought it was because they purposely squashed it. But once I got signed to Sire and saw that they didn't spend a dime to promote me, I was like, oh, that's why punk rock failed.
Well, you know, and the reason they didn't is because most radio stations weren't interested anyway. And I'm sure they saw it as money going down the drain.
Well, they'd been scared off already by the press about it in advance. They'd been told they were going to hate it and it wasn't going to be playable.
Right.
And then, because if they just tried some of it, it would have worked.
You know, you listen to those Ramones albums now, and you can hear the Beach Boys in there. You can hear it.
Yeah, I heard that the first time I heard it.
Yeah, and yet
that was part of why it was funny.
You would have thought catchy stuff under 2 minutes long would have been a radio programmer's wet dream. But you know, they see the picture, leaning against the wall, leather jackets. They're just like, no.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I can tell you when I owned a used record store. You know, when all the DJs would bring in their promos, they weren't bringing in their Fleetwood Mac promos. They were bringing in their Talking Heads promos. They didn't want this stuff. I remember radio just being just like an uncharted territory for the longest time.
Now you go to Kroger here and they're playing Blitzkrieg Bop.
I know. I hear the weirdest shit in the grocery store nowadays. So punk rock
just didn't ever go away because it was good, and it finally permeated the culture. It took quite a while.
Well, yeah.
But finally, it's like mainstream now.
The Buzzcocks songs on car commercials.
Yeah.
You know. And every time I hear them, I go, in my brain, I want to go, oh, they sold out. But on the other hand, I'm like going, well, wait a minute.
God bless them.
Why shouldn't they make some money off of their work?
So for me, for a long time, it was the story of punk rock new wave was a heartbreaking one. Mm-hmm. It was one where this super cool music came along and then got squashed by the man and was not ever able to hit the mainstream. But it took years, but it finally did kind of get back up in there.
Yeah.
You know?
There were always the little ones that kind of snuck in. You know, like when London Calling came out, I started hearing Train in Vain on the radio every once in a while.
Yeah.
You know, not a lot, but every once in a while.
And but most of America thought that was the Clash's first album.
Okay, so at this point, let's move you to Bloomington. You've gotten to Bloomington. You're going to IU, right?
Yeah.
And when you went to Bloomington, did you have the idea that, oh boy, I'm going to join a band when I get to college, or did it just sort of happen?
Yeah, it just happened. Let's see. I played in a band or two in high school, or junior high and high school. I played with classmates or people I met through those classmates, and then my senior year, I was playing with some guys from a different high school, and then when I went to IU, which I did halfway through my senior year of high school, I graduated early.
You graduated early?
And I went straight to college, so I was like the youngest guy on the IU campus, I bet. And I didn't even take my guitar with me at first because I knew, I needed to like try to do well and not flunk out, So when I went down there, that wasn't at all my first thought. But after I was living in the dorm for a while, of course, you get to know some of the other guys, and there were some guitars around. And so I noticed, there's a couple other guys on this floor that like to pick a little guitar, and I had an acoustic guitar. So I brought that back one weekend, and then I always had a guitar around from then on, and I was always messing around with it. About my sophomore year or junior year, somewhere in there, I moved into a house where we had like an extra room, and I turned it into a sort of a jam room. Mm-hmm. And I started jamming with I guess I was really getting the bug for playing, and I was getting real interested in learning more stuff. And I got myself a nice guitar right around that time.
Electric?
Yes. a Fender Stratocaster, and it was the first like really nice playing guitar I had ever owned. And of course, it's easier to play, and so you've got a chance to grow more. So that was when I was having people over to jam in this room frequently. And one night, somehow I met Davey Medlock, who had been one of the original Gizmos, and he came.
Oh, not the one that was in Blackfoot?
No, that's Ricky Medlock.
Oh,
I think.
okay.
And Davey came over, and he didn't play an instrument, but he sang,
Mm-hmm.
and so that was, we were just jamming with him, and then he brought over someone else through that person, I think, or I forget how, but I met Billy Nightshade.
Was it Steve Hikes, maybe?
No.
Okay.
The guy that was named Rex something.
Oh, Rex.
Yeah. Rex played guitar, and so somehow Davey brought Rex over, and then somehow Billy came over, and we wound up playing a gig. So we sort of threw together this act and played a gig, and that was the beginning of me knowing Billy. Mm-hmm. And then I guess before that, the first time I saw the Gizmos, it was.
Oh, so you saw them before in one of their original incarnations?
Yes, when Ted was the front man, and Steve Fikes was in it, and it was when Billy and Dale and Shadow were in it, and Phil Hundley.
Oh, you saw one of those shows.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of those.
They played at the Bluebird.
Uh-huh.
And
I was there.
Okay, I had a film class where you were supposed to go watch movies on this particular night, and I was over at a friend's apartment with a couple other guys, and I blew off my films, and they were like, hey, let's go out to a bar, let's go see somebody play or something. And I remember we looked in the paper at who was playing, and somebody goes, oh, here's the Gizmos at the Bluebird, and none of us had seen them. And so somebody goes, that could be really good or really bad. I remember something like that got said, and we went over there. And for me, it was kind of a life-changing night, because I learned that punk rock was like funny, and that even though they played crudely, they played in a way that I could totally relate to. I was like, I could see playing in this band, I could do this, but what I didn't have yet, because the groups that I played in high school, we did covers, and we did them wrong. Like we wouldn't ever know all the right chords or all the right words or everything. I always had kind of a feel for playing, but I didn't have like the technical knowledge of all that. And by the way, in high school it was the first time one of my bandmates said something about writing songs. He said, hey, if we're ever going to make it big, we got to write songs. We can't just be doing other people's songs. That's the only way to do it. And that was the first time I was like, oh wow, so that's part of the job, huh? So I tried to write a song, back then, and then when I got in the Gizmos, it was like a similar story. Billy was saying, well, you can't just be a cover band, you got to have your own material. And so eventually I just like accepted that part of the job of being a musician is you got to write songs too. Right. So I kind of backed into the songwriting thing, like opposite of
just like the Stones.
Some people get all inspired and start writing poetry and all, and then they learn how to play the guitar and they put their poetry to music. And with me it was the other way around. I got a chance to audition for so I liked the Gizmos right away when I saw them, and in fact I was only about 18, but I had a fake ID, and I bought a pitcher of beer and I took it into the Gizmos dressing room, and to my disappointment, that only about one of them drank.
I was gonna say I don't remember any of them drinking.
I thought Ted was the coolest dude in the world, and right away he was like, no, I'm not drinking.
No, he is the coolest dude in the world, but he's also the biggest square in the world.
Yeah, so I was like
simultaneously both.
I felt bad for even bringing it into, at that point. So anyway, I really liked them after that, and then got a chance to join them when Ted went to medical school and had to be more serious about schoolwork. Right. And at the same time, somehow Steve quit.
Yeah.
And Phil was either fired or quit or whatever happened.
Phil wasn't fired. He just got
he was just dismissed or whatever.
No, he wasn't dismissed. Him leaving was his decision.
Okay.
I mean, you know why he was there to begin with, right? You know all this stuff, right?
I don't know.
Okay, me and Phil, me and Phil and Michael here have known each other almost from the beginning of our lives. I mean, we go way, way back. And me and Phil I reviewed Muff Divin', the single, for my high school paper, and it got through. Okay, because my teacher didn't know what Muff Divin' meant. So I sent it to Bob. I go, hey, thinking maybe he'll send me some free records. That was my, girls weren't on my radar at that point. It was free records. I I knew people got free records, and I wanted to know how they did it. So I said that thing to Bob, and at the same time, we noticed they were looking for a drummer. And I was like, Phil, so you play drums, why don't you go down there and try it?
Oh, that's right, yeah.
So he went down there and tried out, and he was actually their drummer for like a week, maybe 2. And then Shadow showed up, and of course, I mean,
Shadow's good.
Yeah, you're going to take Shadow.
Yeah.
So, but Bob Richard had a crush on me.
Okay.
Did you know this?
That's not hard to deduce, yeah.
Okay. And he wanted me around. So he got the other gizmos together, and he goes, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we had a fat guy with some maracas and a tambourine? And apparently, no, none of them thought it would be funny. But Bob said, well, we're going to do it anyway. And he had Phil.
But it was funny.
It was funny. And that, one of the greatest rock and roll
That
moments
was
I've
one
ever
of-
seen was in New York City. And they were Max's Kansas City, and they had the stage, and they had like lines of tables that came out from the stage like rays of the sun.
Yeah.
And Phil was like in a bad mood. He's wearing like his Boston Red Sox batting helmet and his suspenders with buttons on them and no shirt, and he was a big dude back then.
Yeah.
And he walks out on one of the tables and he goes, where is everybody in this fuck-ass town? And just as he said town, the table goes boom like that, and he just was sprawled out on the floor. But anyway, so by this point, the other guys in the band had kind of gotten used to me because I would schlep their equipment and they didn't have to carry it because I was underage, and the only way I could get into the shows was if I was somehow would walk in as a crowd with everyone else.
Yeah.
So I schlepped your stuff too. I
Yeah,
mean, I was still underage when you were with them, and so that was my deal. I would schlep the stuff in and out, and that's how I got in.
It was funny. That was one of the things at that Bluebird night. When I saw them, was the ludicrousness of that. Like, okay, that guy. They could get by without him, but he is helping bring the party, and it was just funny and fun and crazy, and that was one more thing that was like kind of amazing about the whole
Phil was
situation.
actually pretty popular with the fans. After the shows were over, people would gravitate towards Phil.
Of course, likable guy, and he was just funny, and he was throwing down with all this energy, and it was just
very energetic.
Insane that he was there in the first place, and part of the craziness.
They loved him in Boston.
The whole thing was crazy. Everything I was seeing. Let's see.
So you took them beer, to which they did not drink.
Right, and then I formed a band with a couple of other guys that I knew, and we wound up opening for the Gizmos at the Monroe County Public Library. I still didn't have it together, material-wise, and it really wasn't until I joined the Gizmos that I learned some really valuable lessons about having a band that has written all their own material, knows every note of every song, practices them, gets them down really tight, also be funny at times, have humor in your thing. That was the first band I was ever in, the Gizmos, where we had it together, where there was a bunch of good material, and we knew every note of it, and
they did get very tight. They practiced a lot.
We used to practice. Once I joined, me and Billy and Dale would practice in Dale's bedroom because I started living there with them. All three of us lived there, and the three of us, without Shadow, would just practice. Get all our guitar parts and bass parts and singing and everything down real tight, and then we would practice with Shadow too. And
you can hear it on what few live tapes exist. You can hear.
We were not sloppy. We had
unless Dale was tuning between songs.
Oh yeah.
Was it that melody maker? Was that what it was he had? It just would not
tuning,
stay in tune.
It's not only him; it's all of us. See, that's back before you had a tuner, automatic tuner. We were green. We didn't know you don't have to do it at full volume. But now I use tuners. I can tune silently and quickly. But we did not have those then, so that was a problem. But our live stuff is obnoxious to listen to because of all the tuning. And then also the only thing that was sloppy about us was Billy. Billy was the least technical good player of us, but he was the most fun on stage. So he would make a lot of crazy racket with his bass, inadvertently a lot. If there was ever anything sloppy in our playing, it was probably that. But we knew the parts, and so that's the beginning of me being in the Gizmos.
I could be wrong here. I probably am. Now, did you play with Dale and the Carbites before the Gizmos, or was that something completely different?
No, I remember when that happened. I remember seeing the flyers for that. No, I met them right after that.
It was Dale and like 2 other people, right?
Yeah.
And I don't remember.
A woman on bass. I don't know who they were. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I don't remember.
At least one was a woman, I think,
Yeah.
on bass. But they only played 1 gig, I think, and I never saw them play. And I think I met Dale right after that.
Did you ever ask Dale what a carbide was? Because he had a stock answer. When people
remember.
would go up to him and they go, "What's a carbide?"
Yeah, right.
And he go, "Other cars." Which, if you think about it, that's 100% Dale right there.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
That's a Dale joke there.
Yes. So okay, so now by the time you came in, Phil was gone, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And this was
Phil, Steve, and Ted were all gone.
So they stuck to a 4-piece from that point forward,
Yes.
right?
And Bob was the manager still. And see, Bob was the common thread from the original Gizmos to me being in it. It was all just like Bob made all that happen the whole time. Right when I joined the band, that's when Sid Vicious died, and Ted wrote like a tribute song to him. And Ted came up to our rehearsal, and he said something like we were going to make a single with Ted doing the Sid Vicious song, and I forget what the other one was. Maybe they both were kind of about that or something. And we kind of learned these songs to, I guess, potentially record them with Ted, and then that never happened.
That doesn't sound like something that Dale would like be all in on.
I think so, that he wasn't excited about that.
Yeah,
You're right.
I know Dale fairly well
And
at this point.
I was
and
brand
that
new in the
doesn't
band,
sound like,
so I was just going along with whatever they
Sure.
told me, you know.
and I think Billy probably would have just gone along too because he was so affable. I mean,
Yeah. At the same time, if Dale was kind of starting to bum out about it, Billy might have gone with Dale's attitude sort of too.
Right.
Like, hey, why are we doing this? But you know, we all like Ted, and I was kind of actually excited about playing with Ted, you know, because he was one of the, when I saw the Gizmos, I mean, he was like my favorite thing about it at the outset. And then I was a little disappointed that I wasn't playing with him once
Sure.
I joined the band. But it was a very different band then at that point.
Yeah, he was the thing was I look back and I'm, here I am, this this 15-year-old kid who's probably kind of irritating, who probably, is just going on and on and on about Nuggets. Oh, that Nuggets album. I just got that Nuggets album. And I remember when I got that, I just went on and on and on about it because I loved every song and I couldn't believe I'd never heard these and blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure I was totally irritating. But, everybody was really nice to me.
I remember
the board.
you knowing a lot of the new stuff. Like, I remember you knew who better than I did who Nick Lowe was. I remember that.
I saw Nick Lowe throw up on himself. The second time we saw
You
Rock
really
Pile,
knew him well.
Yeah, the second time we saw Rock Pile, they were opening up for Blondie at the convention center. We're standing there. Of course we're close because we want to see if Blondie's wearing a bra or not. And so we're going. I look over and there's Rock Pile getting ready to go on.
Oh,
Nick's
man.
standing there holding his bass, and then he just goes like this, all over his bass, all over his shirt. He just came right out and kept playing.
Wow.
So
I missed the whole Rock Pile thing. It was like their 2 albums it was all over before I even heard their name.
well, they only put out that one album as Rock Pile, and then there's like 3 or 4 others that might as well be Rock Pile.
Oh, okay.
But
I thought there were 2 Rock Pile albums.
no, just the one.
Okay.
Just because and here's the weird thing. I had this conversation with somebody earlier this week. Nobody can really pin down why they broke up. It was just weird because when you see footage of them, they look like they love each other. They're having a great time.
Yeah.
They're playing this happy
Well,
music.
there's this documentary that I watched not too long ago about them.
About making that album, right?
It's just called like the Rock Pile documentary or something. It says. And anyway, let's not get off track. I have to
I was going to say, what to
keep the
408?
time in mind.
Okay, so at this point, did you live in the house when Phil lived there with you guys?
I forgot, but yes, briefly. Yes.
Because he wasn't there long. He was only there for like a month or 2.
Yeah.
Maybe at the outside. And then he left without paying like rent.
Okay, I didn't remember that.
Well, yeah, what happened, I'm sure you'll remember this part, is when he left, he didn't have any money. He was broke.
He left chicken backs in the freezer, yeah.
Bob told him he'd get him a job, and he didn't. And when he left, every time Billy saw him, because Phil said he left a bunch of meat in the freezer, and he said, here, you guys can have that in lieu of my rent.
We started calling him chicken backs.
Yes, but the thing is whenever Billy would see Phil, one of the first things he'd say is, hey, Phil, where's that rent? And Phil would get good, I left you that meat. And Billy would always go, Phil, chicken backs aren't drugs. So, chicken backs was a thing. Yeah. Well, you know how he did that when he worked at O'Malley's. He worked the meat counter, and every night he would sneak home one package of meat and put it in the freezer because he knew someday he'd need it.
One piece at a time.
Yeah, so
Just like
yeah,
Johnny Cash.
exactly. So when he left the job, he had like a whole freezer full of meat that I assume he brought down with him. So you guys were probably living high on the hog there for a little bit. At this
I did
point,
live there when he lived there.
All right, you're getting ready to record. Let's get to the album, the split album with Dow Jones and the Gizmo. That was the first thing you were on, right? Or were you on?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
And the way that project started was that in that fall of summer or whatever of '79.
That sounds right.
There was a contest to create a sampler record of the local music scene, and they decided to have a series of nights at the Bluebird where bands who had entered the contest and maybe had to get through a screening process, maybe not, I don't know, but would perform at the Bluebird in front of a panel of judges, and then the winners would get to have a song on the sampler record.
Was that the one with the baskets of apples on
Yes.
the cover?
Yes.
I forget what that was called. But
This year's crop.
that's right. All right.
And so we played at the Bluebird to try to get the song on there, and we, despite the debacle that our gig was, we did get selected to do it, and so you got free studio time at Ribbon Rail Studios to do your song, and right away I was told that this song is going to be the beginning of our album. We're going to record this song here, and then we're going to expand on that and make an album. So this will be song one. I was like, oh, okay. And that was my first time of being in a recording studio. So there were things that we were doing wrong that now I would be like, it would be easier, you know. We were all pretty green at it, I think. And so we recorded the song Progressive Rock.
Mm-hmm.
It was to be on the album, but I guess we were allowed to still own the tape or something. I think that was the only song that we did there, I think. And so we must have had that for a little while. And then when we met the Dow Jones and the Industrial guys, which I suppose you're probably going to ask me about too, when we met them, we found out that they'd been doing their recording in West Lafayette at the basement studio of where Brad Garton lived with another guy. And so we drove up there, and we arranged to record there before we even went up there. But I just remember going up there and recording at that house. It was a pretty inexpensive, more low-tech way of recording, but we loved it. We had a great time with those guys, and
Brad's a pretty handy dude. He can get a good sound out of something that you shouldn't be able to get a good sound out of.
They were kind of like Greg Horn, Brad, all of them. They were kind of into like technology and stuff, so more than we were.
Right.
And so they kind of knew about recording a little bit. So we did the other 6 songs there. And the way we met the Dow Jones guys.
Actually, I was there the day Bob got that tape in the mail.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't like it. He was like, God, I think this is great. What do you think? And I was like, nah. I didn't get it at first. But then when I saw them like a few weeks later, and I was like, holy shit. Okay, now I get it.
Well, we had a gig at the Bass Saloon, and maybe 2 nights in a row or something.
I haven't heard that name in years.
I know. And they came, and that was the first time we ever heard of them or met them or anything. And we were playing, and these kind of cool-looking dudes sat down in front of us. And then after we were done, they talked to us, and then they may have come back to our house with us. And anyway, I know that we wound up with their tape by the end of the night, and we were blown away. He had a couple amazing songs on it. So from then on, we were like fast friends with these guys, and we immediately began cooking up, hey, let's play together, because there were no other bands around.
I was going to say, the punk rock fraternity was pretty thin at that point.
Yeah, there was no other bands around that had hardly any awareness of punk rock. We were very much in a vacuum. And so to meet anybody else who was into it was like in the 60s, if a hippie met somebody else with long hair, they were like, they knew instantly like they were brothers, right?
Oh, yeah. And for us, it was like a T-shirt. You would wear a T-shirt that said like Cheap Trick or Sex Pistols or whatever.
Or you've heard of the Clash.
And just hope that one other person in school will come up to you and go, oh yeah, I like them too. Because it didn't happen very often.
Yeah. So that was how we met them, and that was how that album got started and made and everything.
All right. So the album gets made, and then you decide to move.
Right about the time we were like kind of finishing up the album, Bob decided not to be the manager anymore.
I didn't realize that. So he was not the manager when you moved out there?
No. And I remember that, in fact, that it was it almost didn't come out like on the Gulcher label, I think, because all of a sudden Bob wasn't being the Gizmos manager anymore. But then he kind of decided, we'll go ahead and make it a Gulcher record. This is how I remember it. Around that time, we also considered changing our name from the Gizmos, because we thought, okay, this is, we're going to have a record out, and we're not the original bunch, and now Bob's not the guy anymore, keeping the continuity.
Right.
And in fact, we made this big list of band names, a couple of which wound up getting used years later. Like the Mysteries of Life came from this list.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We made this big list, and then we decided none of them were as good as the name the Gizmos, and we just stuck with it because we hadn't come up with anything that we liked enough. So the record came out, and for what it's on the Gulcher label, and although it seemed like Bob wasn't fully in, because he was kind of backing out of the whole thing a little bit, and so.
But didn't he move to New Jersey as well?
After.
So he went after you did?
Yeah, pretty well after, like a year after.
Okay.
He moved up to Hoboken maybe like a year after we did. He visited there right away when we were up there, because he kind of knew all those same people that we were staying with. Jim McDonough.
Sure.
So he was up there right at the start, but he was no longer our manager at that point. And I'm not sure why he backed out of all that. Maybe he'd just done it long enough, or maybe it was because he and Billy and Dale didn't always get along real great.
Yeah, and I think also he probably felt like maybe he was losing a little bit of control.
Yeah, that's probably right.
Because the original guys, they would do what he said.
He was kind of the mastermind, yeah.
Because he was the money man too. I mean, if they wanted to put out a record, they needed to do what he told them to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, and knowing Bob, losing control isn't something he'd be cool with.
Yeah, that's probably what it was. Yeah.
Okay, so you've wait a minute. Before you move out, you record that thing for Bloomington Public Access Television.
Oh, and we did that only like 2 nights before we moved from town.
Now, why is some of it lip synced and some of it not?
I don't know. That was just what they did that night. Yeah.
That is strange, though, isn't it? Because if you're already set up to play live, then why not just go ahead and just?
I guess they just thought, let's try a couple of different ways. Yeah, it is weird, isn't it?
That's a pretty legendary piece of film, though, or videotape.
I didn't see it for a long time, like 25 years.
Nobody saw it for a long time, and then it popped up.
One day, in my mailbox, there it was, and I remember that's when I was still married, and I watched it, and my wife wasn't home, and I watched it, and I was like, oh, geez, it's a little embarrassing to see myself, and then I told my wife about it, and I go, I don't know whether to show you this or not. It's kind of a little, and she was like, she slaps it in there, and and everyone who ever sees it, they like it a lot.
Yeah, it's cool.
So.
Okay, so right after that, you moved to New Jersey, and I think we've already discussed that you only had a drummer for about a week.
Yeah.
Until he snuck out in the middle of the night, somehow noiselessly.
Somehow.
Yeah,
I don't know how he did that.
You
snuck past me when I was sleeping on the couch.
Yeah, you tried to get a drummer. If I remember Dale's story correctly, you guys never really could find a permanent drummer, right?
Well, here's how I would tell that is we ran an ad in the Village Voice, which is how you look for a bandmate back then. Ran an ad in the Village Voice. We didn't have a telephone, but there was a payphone on our corner. We could kind of look out the window and see it. Uh-huh. And we ran an ad in the Village Voice saying we were looking for a drummer, and we put the phone number of that payphone in the ad. By like the first night, we realized, we can't stand out there by the payphone like 24/7.
Right.
So we're probably missing most of the phone calls that if anybody's calling. So I don't know whether we got any calls while we were standing there or not. We may not have hardly.
Right.
So we walked out there and we realized our mistake. So the next week we ran an ad again, and this time we said call between these hours. And we would go out there and stand there by that payphone during those hours, and we got a bunch of calls. And we set up auditions at one of those rehearsal studios in Manhattan. When you're in a band in New York, you can't rehearse in your apartment,
right, ever.
So to rehearse, you have to rent a room for like $15 or $20 or $25 an hour, probably about $15 back then. And there'd be a building with just like that. Lots of bands practicing in rooms. So we auditioned drummers that way, and I think we auditioned about 12 drummers, possibly all in one day or something, maybe. So we had this cattle call. All these drummers came through and played with us for a while. And we chose this guy, Robbie Wise, because he kind of threw down real hard. He kind of played like real aggressively. seemed like he knew how to play drums, and he knew all about the scene, the CBGB scene and everything. So we chose him, but by about the second rehearsal, we realized like, oh man, Billy and Dale and Robbie do not get along. And now I realize, like, and be careful which part of this you let out be heard. But Robbie is a little bit of a difficult guy, and now I was always able to get along with him, but he was a cantankerous guy, and he was only in his 20s then. Now I realize that his personality is it's a little hard to mesh with him sometimes. And in fact, he went through a period of time where I met him like 10 years ago in New York, and he was real out of his mind during that time. He was on weird medications and had been injured somehow, and he was just like kind of cleared a path around, like people where we were playing just kind of like gave him a lot of space. Anyway, we never got along great with Robbie, even though he was a pretty good drummer. So that kind of doomed us. The Gizmos was that Billy and Dale could not really work well with Robbie. Like, for example, Dale was used to telling whoever was our drummer, like you said, he'd say, hey, here's what we need for this song. Play these parts and stuff. And Robbie'd be like, no, I hear this other part. But, he was like not easy to work with.
Yeah, Dale wouldn't like it.
Yeah, well, and it's not cool for any artist to say, I wrote this song and I'd like to hear it this way if we could one time. And then
this is how I wrote the part.
And you got somebody fighting you on it from the minute you're trying to even just like introduce it. So that was a difficult thing. Although Robbie could play drums, and when we played live, I mean, he did throw down pretty hard. When we did that session with the one session that we did after moving to New York, Hard Hoboken Line and See About You. It's like Biscuits and Gravy, right? There's like 6 songs or something. That's Robbie playing on there.
Yeah, those are good.
Yeah, so you can tell he could play and everything. But personality-wise, that was a real challenge. And that was
many a band.
And that was hard because we were challenged already, man. After moving to New York, Path Train went on strike after we'd been there like 3 days. Mm-hmm. And so we're having to take the hot, sweaty bus into Manhattan and get day jobs. And then the hot, sweaty buses only come back out till about 11:30 at night. So we couldn't even be out late in Manhattan like we wanted to. Just everything was hard. Riding mass transit, having to get jobs. Everything was difficult, like auditioning drummers. Finally, trying to hustle up gigs. We'd go around to all the clubs, and it was like, we can have a gig, but it's in 4 months because there's so many bands already ahead of us. And so we did like an audition night at CBGB's, and then we got a gig there, and we went around. We went to the place where the Yippies had their headquarters, and we got a gig there, and we played there, and we played at a place called Trudy Heller's that was like right where the Path Train dropped us off in the village, and we played at Maxwell's a couple times in Hoboken. And we were all absorbing a bunch of new music that was coming out at the time. It's like 1980 right then. Anyway, keep me on track.
All right, with a little hindsight looking back, do you think things would have been better if you, say, had moved to another big city, like, say, Chicago or Detroit, or maybe, or even stayed in Indianapolis? Do you think your fortunes would have been a little better had you not made that East Coast move?
Sure would have been different. Yeah, I've thought back about that too. I thought even a city like Chicago would have been very daunting to me at the time, but we could have handled it because we handled New York.
Well, Chicago also would be a little more familiar.
It would have been so much
geographically,
so much closer. We could have still driven back to Bloomington and played and stuff. Instead, we ditched Bloomington. We could never get back there. It was 850 miles or something. So we never once got to come back to Bloomington and play until way years after we broke up. So yeah, we totally were out of touch with our scene. If we'd moved to Chicago, we still could have driven back. And so yes, looking back, the idea of moving to New York was not at all well thought out. But at the time, we just kind of said, hey, well, it wasn't me so much. It was like the other guys were older than me, and they were the ones who had written the songs. So I was newer in the band too. So I was really always following their lead. And so when Billy and or Dale said to me, hey, we're thinking about moving to a big city, where stuff is happening. And I remember at first kind of, reading magazines about Los Angeles punk scene, we thinking about moving there. I think Chicago didn't have a real thriving punk scene that we were aware of, and so we didn't heavily consider it. And then we were looking at New York, and I don't know where, if we thought of anywhere else, but all of a sudden it was like, hey, our friends Jim and Carroll will let us stay at their place in New York, so let's move to New York. And we were like, New York, that'd be great.
That was probably half the decision right there, a place to stay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a big part of it, yes.
Sure.
And I just sort of followed those guys' lead, thinking, well, yeah, man. And then, so it was kind of ill-advised, the move, I would say. And yet it made us grow as people a lot.
I was going to say, did the adversity sort of build the character?
Yeah, you had to get dragged along to some different levels, you know. I don't know, that did happen, but it did deliver a few crushing blows to the band.
Right.
And then also, okay, after we'd been there a while, and I was having to grow up, and everything, I was like 20, getting ready to turn 21, and the experience of moving to the city, you know, was a big grow up thing. Billy and Dale, I felt like were not leading it enough right then in real smart ways. We started rehearsing. Rank and File got us hip to where they were rehearsing, and it was Giorgio Gomelski's building. Giorgio
From the Yardbirds?
Yes. And Giorgio had this building in the Chelsea area of Manhattan. And
Pardon me 1 second. Was he still alive?
Giorgio?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you've met him?
Yeah, we knew him. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, go ahead. I always heard he was pretty much a character.
Kind of. He was funny. Yeah, he had this real thick accent, like
right.
Middle Eastern accent. Not Middle Eastern, but Middle European. That's the word.
Like, I think, wasn't he from like Turkey or something?
Yeah, you know, almost like Russia, but somewhere near it, more like. And
one of those stands.
Like he said when they were, because he said when they were a kid, they had to form a jazz club in order to hear any records or anything. It wasn't like you could just go to a record store and.
Right.
And we started rehearsing there. What got me talking about that? Going there.
Rank and File turned you on to a place to play at?
Oh yeah, a place to rehearse. That's where we rehearsed. I guess you were still just talking about whether or not we should have moved to New York or somewhere else. And
right.
Yeah, looking back on it, you know, Chicago probably would have been a good thing to try. But really, the thing that mostly came back to me now, I haven't been thinking about it much in the last few years, but if we had just stayed in Bloomington, we could have gone and played in Chicago and come back. Life would have been so easy in Bloomington. You know, you didn't have to earn a lot of money to stay there.
Right.
And we would have been like big fish in this little tiny pond and could have felt good about that. And
regular gigs for beer money?
Yeah, we didn't make a ton of money or anything, but we could have.
But that would have, what I mean is that would have come.
Living cheaply there, we could have gone and played St. Louis and Chicago and Indianapolis and Louisville, and you know, we could have done that, and that would have been a more prudent thing to have done, but we didn't do that.
Okay. Now, when it all fell apart, it wasn't like rancorous or anything, right? Wasn't it just sort of like?
Here's how I would remember it: that I quit first because I was feeling. Oh, I started to tell the story. One thing that led me to this was I started feeling kind of disrespected. I would say the most by Billy. Mm-hmm. And probably because Billy had a little insecurity, you know, and wanted to still be more dominant and everything. Because, you know, Dale is not as dominant. He is in a way because of his intellect and everything, but he's not like a forceful guy who tries to dominate every
He doesn't flaunt it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Whereas then I can understand what you say about Billy, and I don't mean it in any sort of disrespectful way at all.
Yeah, and I love Billy.
And we all do. But yeah, he could sometimes turn on the forcefulness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was probably the most disappointed with his sort of lack of leadership, while being sort of dismissive of me. Mm-hmm. You know, and you put the two things together, and it's like, wait, I got a guy who's like underperforming and being a little rude to me and everything. So I was starting to get a little tired of that, you know. I remember one time we did our rehearsal, and Giorgio said, "Hey, when you're done rehearsing, David Johansen's up here. We're going to play his new album. You guys are invited to hang out with us." And I was like, "Oh, cool." So
it is cool.
But we weren't getting along. Like, it was the last days of us still being a band, and I was real annoyed. We came upstairs after our rehearsal and hung out with David Johansen, and Ivan Julian was like staying at Giorgio's place, kind of helping him look after things. And it was just, as I remembered, it was like me, David Johansen, Giorgio, and Ivan Julian, and then Billy and Dale and me. And we were listening to David Johansen's new album, and he was being very friendly to us and everything. And I was thinking, you know, I could chat this guy up. I could schmooze with him, and that's what we should do. Except I'm going to quit this band because I'm just not digging it. I'm not the leader of it, and that would be a leader thing to do, sort of, you know. And I remember being in that. it's like, man, I'm hanging out with David Johansen, but I think I'm just gonna go home. I'm just kind of bummed out about the whole. So it's kind of weird, mixed up feeling of emotions. All that was to just explain about how we started not getting along so well. And then, so somewhere right after that, I decided that it was just kind of, I felt stupid being in a band. It's like one more guy walking around the village with his fucking guitar on his shoulder, trying to be a rock star, and I'm playing with these guys who are not being cool to me, and it's all so hard and everything. And I was like, I got to grow up and just have a job and try to save money and get somewhere, in this world. And so I quit the band, and we still had like a gig or two on the books. There was one at Max's Kansas City, and I remember just saying, no, I'm not going to do it. And they did it as a trio, and they did fine. I remember hearing a recording of it, but for some reason they did not continue like that. They kind of they started playing with some different people and just kind of broke up.
Right. Well, yeah, Dale moved back.
And I'm sure they probably dumped Robbie immediately because they weren't getting along with him.
Right.
And Dale moved back pretty soon. I remember before he moved back, he came over to my house, my apartment.
So you were still in New Jersey when he moved back?
Still in Hoboken,
okay.
Yeah. And before he left, he came over to my apartment one night or two, and we sat around and played guitar together before he moved back.
Mm-hmm. Now, did Billy go like straight to Boston from there?
No, he hung around New York for like a while, like 6 months or a year, and he fell in with some different people, and then he moved to Boston to play with his brother and Jamie.
Was he from Boston? Was he
No,
from that area?
Both Billy and his brother Mark were from Minnesota.
That's what I thought.
Way up north in Minnesota, but they both moved to Boston because they knew of the Boston music scene, and Jamie Severin, who had lived with us in Bloomington, was going to be the singer in this band, and he was from like Worcester or something.
Right.
And so, he kind of knew Boston, and they moved up there. I think they moved to Worcester at first, and then they moved to Boston, and then they kind of did okay for a while.
So you quit the band, but yet you stayed in New Jersey longer than the other two. Hoboken's in New Jersey, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I stayed there longer than the other guys. I stayed in Hoboken 13 years.
Yeah, you outlasted them.
I had like 5 different apartments or something.
Now, from there, did you end up here, or was there a mid spot where you?
No, from Hoboken I moved here.
Okay.
1993.
So you've been in Nashville since '93.
Yeah, 26 years.
Now, did you find it a fairly welcoming atmosphere compared to where you'd been before, or was it kind of a hard nut to crack?
Really welcoming from the musicians and writers and so forth. Really difficult nut to crack from the business.
Well, that I knew. I've heard "Fuck This Town," so I know about that. And I was going to ask, when you first heard that song, did you know you were going to be name dropped in it, or did you just
No.
Did you know in advance that you were going to be name dropped in
I don't
that
think
song?
so. I don't think I did. I don't know if I heard him say my name. And, I'm pretty sure I heard him do the song a few times before he recorded it. So I guess I knew I was in it before it was recorded.
Because a friend of mine turned me on to me. He's like, oh, this guy's right up your alley. You're really going to like this. And I listened to, hey, there's a song called "Fuck This Town."
He yells my name out.
I said, that's got to be funny. I'm listening to that. And I put it on.
It is funny, too.
It's a fucking great song.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
And then you go, Tim Carroll. I know that guy. And I was like, I wonder if it's the same one. And then I was thinking, okay, Nashville.
Couldn't be the same.
Blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, it has to be. And then I found out shortly thereafter, I think I heard from Dale that you got name dropped on there. So I just thought that was really cool. I don't know that many people that have been name dropped in a song. So I assume you always thought that was pretty funny. He didn't take it personal.
Well, he says I'm one of the only things he does like about this town. Me and BR549 are like the only things he likes here. And the first song on his first album is my song,
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
So yeah, I knew it was all in good, good.
Yeah, and then I realized that the BR549 did after the hurricane.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Like the third album or something like that. Yeah, I was.
Do you still get little checks every once in a while for this stuff?
Yeah.
Because the legendary Stardust Cowboy, like once or twice a year, gets a check for like $24, $16.
Yeah.
And they're usually like from like Israel, Turkey,
right.
wherever.
Yeah, I get from foreign things like that. Yes, I've luckily I've got enough different songs that have been exploited one way or another. Like either somebody's recorded it like that, or it got in a movie or something. So my BMI statements every quarter show, a lot of different sources.
Right.
That's one of them. I'm really happy anytime someone wants to do one of my songs. It's just artistically a really nice.
These days, that's where the money is, right? I mean.
Yeah, I would say the money is kind of. Yeah, it's either somebody who's already got a huge audience if they do your song, or placing the song in a movie or a commercial, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and again, I mean, 30 years ago we would have thought like, oh, I can't believe he did that, and now, I'm like, good for you, man. Make some money. You know, I mean, you probably lived in a basement with roaches for 10 years while you were writing this stuff.
Right.
Get yourself an apartment now.
There's two reasons why it's a good thing. Because it wasn't too many years ago when I would hear other, kind of high-minded musicians talk about how it was offensive, to hear a Kinks song on a ketchup commercial or something.
I remember. Yeah.
And right away that rubbed me wrong. I was like, why is that offensive? Here's why it's not only not offensive, but it's like a very fucking cool thing. Is number one, then that cool person who we think a lot of their music, they get paid, right? Yeah. Number two, instead of hearing some young ad executive's knockoff version of good music, we're hearing the good music. So we're it's like less pollution to us. Instead of some bad ad executive's song, we're hearing like Ray Davies' song or whatever. So not only does Ray Davies, and he's a bad example because he's already richer, but somebody who wasn't already rich, and then they get a nice little paycheck from this thing, let them get paid, and then also we're hearing cool music.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, whether
you hear morphine on a commercial or something like that.
I think I heard, this band, the Black Hollies. I mean, they're like this really loud, distorted, psychedelic band. I mean, like they sound like if Rain Parade and Slayer had gotten together. And yet I heard them on a commercial. I'm like going, that's the fucking Black Hollies. That's the thing I like about it is that these days you don't know what song you're going to hear. Like you said in the grocery store. Yeah. Every time I go to the grocery store, I hear something that never would have ever been played on the radio when it came out.
Right.
And and there it is in the dairy section.
Yeah. With the passage of time, things get a little wackier, don't they?
And less scary, I think. Because nowadays I've got all these guys that would have beat the shit out of me if they'd caught me with a Ramones album. Now they're like going, oh, I love the Ramones. I always liked them. I'm like going, no, you didn't.
Right.
Starting in 1990 isn't always. I'm looking at the clock.
I'm just kind of keep. Yeah.
You got to stop.
Don't want to run out.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not being impatient when I say that.
No, that's cool. I understand. You got to schedule.
I don't mind talking about all this.
In that song, Fuck This Town, he also goes, this is something I've always been personally curious about. He says something about too many riders in the round.
And he always goes, riders in the round.
Oh, yeah.
He always pronounces that.
Is that a thing in this town?
And
can you tell people what a rider in the round is?
Yeah, that's when it's a very, very common occurrence here where four songwriters will set up in a bit of a circle facing each other. Mm-hmm. And they take turns playing a song. So three of them are sit there while one plays their song, and then it goes to the next person. And you just keep doing that. And there's an audience sitting around them watching all this. And then sometimes it's not literally in the round. They do it up on stage, and they'll sit across,
I've seen a couple of them, and they were just like in a row.
Uh-huh. At the Bluebird, the in the round thing, the Bluebird in Nashville, was a real thing because of the way the room is set up, and they just started doing it that way, where you sat in this little circle facing each other, and then sometimes the players wind up playing with each other a little bit if the song is something you can play with. So that's what an in the round is. And in this town, it's not like an open mic. It's in this town. It sometimes those in the rounds, like all four people are playing kind of hit songs, mm-hmm. and then sometimes it's not hit songs, but it's songs that have been covered by people, or they've, fairly high level. Right.
Now, I guess, and that's pretty close to what I thought, but in my mind, I was thinking that it was something like maybe, a club would bring, 4 or 5 people in to do, like you say, take turns doing songs, but maybe they would be unknowns, and there would be people in the audience there to scout,
all that does happen. I was talking about the high level in the rounds, but there are also a zillion of them going on that are practically like an open mic, or or they are just one notch above that, where the people at the open mic got sorted out and invited, the best ones, do that, and the audience is either just there to watch be entertained by some music. There might be people who are sort of scouting songs and stuff, but I hate to say it, but I think the people in the industry are way too lazy to do that, and they just don't even go out anywhere. If you don't if their friend, the lawyer, doesn't bring a CD with a song on it to them, they're not going to hear it.
It's that bad.
They don't go out and look. Nah. Yeah, it's that bad.
The days of discovering the next starlet in the drugstore is gone.
Kind of. For example, there's a young lady, and I don't want to disparage someone, so maybe be careful which part of this you would air. But there's a young lady who's real talented, who I've known here for about 6.5 years or something like that, and she's real good. She's a real character, and she got signed to Rounder Records just about 2 months ago. And it's like, way to have your ear to the ground, guys. I mean, 5 years ago you could have done this, you know. So I'm sure they think they've discovered somebody, but it's like she's been around for quite a while, and she was just as good the first day I met her. She's probably better now, but she was really good then. That's just one of a million, and nobody else noticed her. None of the other labels noticed her, and none of the publishers noticed her until now. Yeah, it's that bad as far as talent scouts.
So it's definitely become
they
corporate.
Don't exist. Yeah. There's enough. Also, there's so much happening all the time, and there's so many people trying to get a deal all the time, and some of them have a lot going on, or some of them just like have a lot of money or something, and there's all these ways that all this stuff is coming across their desk all the time. It's coming from being filtered from friends, and so they've got enough coming across their desk that they're like, I'm going home tonight. They don't go out to a bar and see somebody play. It can happen, and I've had things. Some of my little successes have come that way, not so much from industry insiders, but like some artists would see me play and go, hey, I'm going to cover that song. And it's because, they were standing there, and that's why it happened. That's how the BR549 one happened. Chuck saw me playing it a couple times live. One of my movie cuts happened that way, where I was playing at Lee Von Helm's house, those Midnight Rambles.
Wait a minute. You met Lee Von Helm?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I didn't know this.
Been in his house, yeah. And I played my song. One of my songs is I have a few good songs, and this one particularly has always kind of been sort of a powerful thing that will silence a room. And I played that song, and this movie director came up to me and said, I'm making a movie here in town, and that song would be perfect for this scene that we've got. And so, and the song got in the movie, and I got paid and everything. And that was the case where it just seemed somebody seeing me play it live got me something.
I gotta think that's a good feeling to be sitting in the theater and all of a sudden you hear yourself.
In 1999, I had 2 songs in movies, and so 2 different times I got to go to the movie theater and hear it and see it on the big screen. And it's thrilling. Both times, neither time did I know exactly where it was going to happen. And so I was kind of sitting there, kind of sweaty palms, waiting for it. One of them, it doesn't happen until the closing credits. So I didn't know. And so it got to the credit, and I was like, where was my song? They told me it was in there. And I was like, oh, man. And then, boom, it comes on during the closing credits.
That's good placement.
It actually is. You get paid a little more.
Yeah. Yeah, because I know the first time I saw myself on a big screen in Constantine, it only lasted a second, but I was like...
Oh, it's so fun, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, I would wish that experience for anyone, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. But and like I was in that movie Red Eye, and so and again, you don't know where it's going to happen. All you know is they just filmed you a bunch of times, but you don't know where they're going to put you. Yeah. So you'll be sitting there. Sometimes I'm even looking at myself for 2 or 3 seconds before I go, oh, well, there I am. So but I can imagine like hearing a song that I wrote in a movie would just be just an absolute high.
Yeah. And then like that television show Nashville, ABC Nashville, that ran for a few years. I co-wrote a song with a guy, and it got in that TV show. It's not me singing it, but it's him singing it. But I co-wrote it with him. And then also in the pilot for that show, I actually was in it, but in such a small way that even I wouldn't recognize myself if I didn't know that it was me. So it's not like I'm like acting or something.
Sure.
But I got paid and I was in it.
Me and Billy Nightshade were both in Thank You for Smoking, right?
I remember you did something to get. You got him in something.
What happened was he moved to Los Angeles without any sort of a plan whatsoever.
Yeah.
He just had a nice place to stay, and he asked me what I did. I told him I do this background work. I can get you in it. So I took him down to Central Casting and signed him up, and we both got booked on Thank You for Smoking. And during one scene, like a courtroom scene, you can't really see that it's us, but I can tell you that it is. They put me on one chair on one side of the door, and they put him on another chair on the other side of the door. And if you look real close, you can see us. And Billy did not take to that profession at all.
I know. He bailed on it so quick.
Because there's a lot of waiting. I mean, you might be there for 18 hours, and you might actually work an hour. Like the rest of us just sitting there. And he was always a little restless. Anyway.
When I was,
And you can't leave.
We were there forever.
It's not like you can say, like, well, I really need to be. It's like, no, you have to stay till they call cut.
The pilot for that show, we had to stay a long time. In fact, I had to stay like an extra bunch of hours because they said, hey, and I think I got paid for it, but
you do get paid for it.
But they said, hey, we kind of need you. We think we might be filming you again, so if you could hang. And we stayed hours and hours and hours, and then they didn't do it.
That happens all the time.
And I remember I had to fly out the next morning and go be with my dad who was in the hospital, and I remember being really tired and telling my mom, like, well, I was up really late because I was in this television show yesterday. And then she wound up becoming a real fan of the show later on.
I heard it was a good show. I just never got around to watching it. There's so many things. We talk about this all the time. There's so much to watch.
Yeah.
That there's no way anybody can keep up with all of it.
Right.
I try to watch the best.
People binge. Best. That's why people binge watch a whole 8 years of a show all of a sudden.
That's how I do it.
To catch up.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, nowadays when I download shows, I don't watch them. I wait till the seasons end. And then I watch them all at the same time.
Yeah.
Because, to me, it's like a book, but like 10 chapters. Television.
It's kind of fun to just get into it.
Yeah, and television has really replaced movies as far as adult entertainment is concerned. I don't mean porn, but I mean something that a 59-year-old person would want to watch.
Yeah, and now you can do this in your own home. And like I was looking at some old ads in the Terre Haute paper, and it was like, look how many movie theaters there used to be.
Oh, I know.
It's because nobody had that stuff at home.
Yeah, and how many drive-ins there used to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in the drive-in, so.
Sneaking in the trunk of the car.
My dad suggested that. No, we didn't do it because my mom would get mad every time my dad would suggest it.
Oh, I didn't do that with my family.
No, my dad wanted to put us kids in the
with
trunk.
other kids. Yeah, we did that.
And my mom was just like, you are not putting my children in the trunk of your car. And it only saved him like what, $2 or something, and you're like, Dad. Okay, so we'll go ahead and wind this down.
What else should we talk about?
I'm just saying, it sounds like they're keeping you busy here.
Yeah.
I mean, I see you're playing all the time.
Yeah.
You got a new record out.
And I'm writing when I'm not doing other stuff. Yeah, I'm involved in a number of different projects with other people, different ways of collaborating with people, playing guitar with people, producing some things for other people a little bit.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that's something I never planned to do, but once in a while someone will ask me to, and so I've enjoyed it when I've done it. No big label projects, but sometimes privately funded things and things. I mean, I've been here 26 years, so for me it would take quite a while to explain the whole ride I've been on during this time. A lot of it did involve playing country music and all, but I don't feel like that's what I'm really doing now. I'm just writing my kind of rock songs, and
I'm telling you, that new one,
And it's old now. I got another one ready to go.
Really?
Like in a few days I'll have it. Yeah.
Okay.
It's all recorded, and I'm just. And I should give you the previous record to that one. I've made like.
Well, I have all of them downloaded. Except that one.
Okay, because I think that my new one might be my 12th solo album since moving to Nashville. Before that, it was the band things, the Blue Chieftains and the Gizmos.
Well, why don't you plug your last album and then we'll cut it.
Okay, yeah, my last album was, and it's self-released, but it was called Keeping Time, and I think it's 10-song album.
This is the one that Phil wrote about, right?
I think that is correct.
A few months ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, he did a really good job with that. He's such a good writer.
Yeah.
I don't even try to keep up. I'm just like, I'll pound something out every once in a while, but then Phil give me something and I'll just go like, God, look at this. He made Uriah Heep sound good. So. Okay, well, that's cool. We can end it right there then. Because I think it's almost 5.
Yeah, I'm not in a giant hurry, but yeah, I got to be done at 5.
Well, we're not sure. The door's open for our thing at 7. And we're not exactly sure if we're going to encounter any rush hour on the way there.
You will a little bit.
Okay. Nice theater. Have you been in there?
The Ryman Auditorium.
But is it the Ryman or it's the one?
CMA Theater. Country music.
Apparently, it's the one connected to the museum.
Oh, it's in the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
I'm not. I only know like the Ford Theater there. I don't know if that's it or not.
There's more than one theater in the place?
It's a pretty big place, and their stuff is it's real nice.
I haven't been there in a long till last time I was there like 20 years ago. So I guess it's bigger.
It's a different place, and it's way bigger and real nice.
Like it's a different whole building?
Yeah, it's in a different locality. And it's a different building. And
okay, yeah, because it used to be across the street from the Hank Williams Museum there in that strip mall.
It's 10 times that. It's 20 times that. Oh my God. It's a way different thing.
Yeah, and I was hoping while we were here we'd go in there and check out. They still have that Outlaw Country exhibit, which I know was there like about 6 months ago.
Right, I'm not sure currently what they've got going, but even though it's huge and it's obviously the real commercial thing and all, there's still so much cool stuff in there that it's.
I'm still sure there has to be.
It's a cool time.
And the last time I was in there, I didn't know half about country music what I know now. So I'm going to go in there and see stuff that is going to wow me now.
It'll mean more to you now. Yeah. It's a cool thing, and their theaters are very nice. Really nice.
Good. Yeah, we don't go to a lot of shows, so this is going to be kind of special. Yeah.
And who I'm forgetting who you were seeing.
Marty Stewart with Roger McGuinn and Chris Hillman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Kenny Vaughn will probably play guitar with him. He's a great guitar player who I've known for a long time, since 25 years probably.
Oh.
And he plays with Marty, among other people. I guess if it's Marty's band, I know.
I think it is his band with Chris.
I can tell you.
Chris Scruggs on bass and Harry Stinson on drums.
Connie Smith, but Trent, Kenny Lovelace, Jim Lauderdale, Grand Ole Opry Square Dancers, and Fabulous Superlatives.
Yeah, the Superlatives. Yeah, that's those guys. Yeah.
I'm kind of excited.
Yeah, me too.
I've never seen any one member of the Byrds ever, so it's kind of a big deal.
But yeah, I married a woman. I was married for 11 years, and I'm the woman I married. I've been divorced for 5 now. But she was a country singer. Over the years, a lot of evolution happened there, and we I don't know if you know any of this, but
I was at the show. If you remember correctly, I saw both of you in Indianapolis right shortly after I moved back from California.
Maybe
it was at Birdie's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird place to play.
It is a weird.
So that was during we were starting to get to tour quite a bit at that point, but we did a lot of international traveling, and I played on the David Letterman show twice with her. We played on the Grand Ole Opry probably about 300 to 400 times, I would say, over about a 12-year period.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of things happened. Like I wound up doing the Levon Helm's Midnight Ramble twice, hanging out with him at the end, eating marijuana with him and stuff. I've also smoked pot with Willie Nelson on his bus.
I've told him a million times. That is, my.
He gave me a bag of it too.
Awesome. Really,
yeah.
Willie's choice, or whatever.
Probably, yeah.
He said, "How are you fixed for marijuana?" And I said, "Well, I'm down to my last bud." He rolls up a bag of it, and just gives it to me. But that was after we'd been smoking it.
Sure.
Because we opened some shows for him, and we opened for Merle Haggard sometimes, and an awful lot of things happened.
Sure.
But I was still always, kind of pecking away doing my thing too. But when her thing took off more, and she wanted me to play guitar with her, because I was like, I want you to succeed. So
sure.
if there's a better guitar player for you, let's get him. And she was like, I want you. So anyway, I did all these things for years, and got to do all those cool things. Went to Japan a couple times, and all kinds of. Went to England 50 times.
So I'm gonna assume that Willie is every bit as cool as he looks.
He is.
He just seems like the coolest guy to just sit next to and just.
He's pretty amazing,
yeah.
Because of somehow he handles that fame,
mm-hmm.
and one of the things he seems to kind of do is like when he walks into a room with a bunch of people, he seems to kind of know that like his fame is extreme,
Oh, everybody knows Willie.
So everybody wants to say hi to him. So he kind of just takes care of that. Like instead of making you nervously walk over to him, he kind of walks up to you. Like if he walked in here, he would come over. And he'll kind of introduce himself or shake hands with kind of everyone and stand there with you for a minute so that you don't feel like he just blew on by.
Right.
And he kind of looks at you like, just an honest look, and yeah, he's not like full of shit and he's not standoffish. And
No, he doesn't seem like that. He just seems like the nicest guy you'd ever want to sit next to on a bus.
yeah.
Smoke a joint with.
And he's kind of interested in whatever, who are you? Not like who are you, but more like,
What do you do?
Tell me about
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, what's
I
going
met
on?
Studs Turkle once, and he was just like that too. He wanted to know about me. It was like, I didn't even
He's
know
tired of talking
him.
about himself.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just interesting.
Some people handle their fame really well somehow, balance it out,
George Clooney. When I worked on Good Night and Good Luck,
Okay,
there's
yeah.
about 30 or 40 of us in this office scene, okay? He comes out, starts going down the line, shaking hands with every single person. Hi, I'm George Clooney. I'm glad you're here on my set, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like going, yeah, we know you're George Clooney. You don't.
But he breaks down that barrier
But he
right
did.
away.
Yeah,
So that like, okay, cool, I've already met him, so I'm not like nervously hoping to meet him.
And it worked well. It was
Yeah.
it was a good shoot. It was an easy day, no problems, boom. You
Yeah.
know? And there are people in Hollywood like I worked with John Ritter on 8 Simple Rules
seemed like
about
he was a
3 or
cool
4
guy,
months
too.
before he died. Super cool guy. I mean, he was just like talking to everybody. He was so nice that the crew actually got mad at him instead of us for once. Because they're like waiting for the next take.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, really? Yeah, you got a 3-year-old daughter? I do too. Blah, 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 blah. And they're like, John! He's like, oh, okay, sorry. I discovered, I think I told him this the other day, I discovered that the nicest people in show business were the ones that were huge, and then they weren't huge.
Right.
And then they're coming back.
I know it. I agree because like I always found that out at the Grand Ole Opry that people were so fucking nice, and I used to say that too. It's because they were way up and then they came back down and they kind of got the perspective.
Yeah, because John Ritter.
And now they know it's just all about being nice to people and being
exactly.
cool.
John Ritter on Three's Company, he was like one of the biggest TV stars ever, and then poof. And I also worked with Henry Winkler, and he was awesome. He was so cool. I was in the lunch line behind him, and he had his hands full. He's trying to get some butter with his knife, and he just can't get it because it's one-handed. And he finally gets it, and it's like this huge fucking
And
piece
butter
of
can be hard sometimes.
Yes, it's like half a stick or something. He looks over at me and he goes, "Hey, you want some butter, buddy?" And I just went, "Hey, I don't think I should." And he was cool about it, I mean, some people would get kind of crappy. I think falling from a certain height is a humbling experience that sticks with you.
And then they're just glad to be here.
Like Ringo.
And it's all about, hey, good to see you. In fact, one of the Grand Ole Opry acts who I was around them a lot, but they the Riders in the Sky, and one of the earlier like sort of biggish shows that I did with my wife where we took a band and we had to drive to like Columbus, Ohio or something, and we were opening for those guys. That's sort of a big venue, and one of the guys from their band came over to our dressing room and just said hi and stood there and talked to us nicely for a couple minutes. And I remember thinking, what a fucking cool thing to do. If I would ever get to be a star, I hope I would do that, because it just relaxed us all. It's like,
yeah.
And it was just such a nice thing and it's such a small gesture. And really, there's been opening acts for me or the band I was in, and I didn't even bother to do that. I was just so glad to have a chair to sit in or whatever, just wait until showtime.
Right.
But I mean, he actually went out of his way to make us feel good, and I thought, what a great thing to remember.
Yeah. It's always nice to meet nice people. And that was especially, you're living in a town where there's lots of people who, like you say, are trying to succeed.
Yeah.
When I was in Hollywood, that's all that was there.
Yeah.
Is people and the minute they found out that you couldn't help them,
you're invisible.
They were gone.
Yeah.
They were just like that. And I imagine it's kind of the same.
This town
over
too
here.
there's a major, there's plenty of sincerity too, but there is a lot of like kind of user stuff that goes on where somebody like conniving and just being nice to people only for the purpose of, if I suck up to this person, I could get maybe this gig or something. And so I'll act like I'm his best friend, and I think all his jokes are real funny and stuff, and I'll schmooze with him really hard. And that goes on constantly too, But there's plenty of people that are, a little above that and who keep their head on squarely,
Yeah.
But I'm always impressed when people get quite a bit of success, especially fame. Because there's success and then there's like fame.
Yeah, fame has never interested me whatsoever.
Like, yeah, like people who are great musicians who play in someone's band, they're not as famous. They don't have that whole head trip of being really. Although they can get the ego too, just because they have a great job.
Mm-hmm.
But the people that somehow handle it really, their fame really well, it blows me away that they don't let it warp them real badly.
Because I'm not going to talk about any of them, but there were folks out in Hollywood who were not nice or pleasant to be around at all.
There are lots of Californians here, who have moved here, and frequently I will see, especially the people who just arrived, they're still in California mode. And they're still like dropping names and still trying to put on a front like there's more going on than there really is.
Yes.
And they don't realize that you can kind of sense those things. And I think people drop that stuff after a while. But yeah, I can tell there's a major, even when the little time I've spent in LA, I picked up on that's going on all the time. People are constantly trying to impress everyone. And like you say, they're not really sincere.
I met a guy out in California once, and like within like 10 minutes he goes, "You're from the Midwest, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yeah." He says, "I can always tell." And I was like, "Okay, how?" He says, "'Cause you people are always so overly nice." And I was like, "Yeah, pretty much."
But nice is good.
Yeah, if you get a flat tire in Indiana, within 10 minutes, someone's going to stop and ask if you need help.
And some of the biggest stars ever are from the Midwest. Marlon Brando, Johnny Carson, James Dean,
David Lee
Michael
Roth.
Jackson. Yeah, Axl Rose. We could name them all.
Oh yeah. Raymond Burr.
Where's he from?
I think he's from South Bend, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I knew that he was a Hoosier.
Yeah.
Cool.
I forget his name now. He was not Red Buttons, but Red Skelton.
Red Skelton?
Oh, yeah. Vincennes.
Yeah.
That was one of my first school field trips. We went down to Vincennes. And that's one of the things that you see.
I went to school there, so I was there for 2 years, and I learned all about Vincennes.
I loved him when I was a little kid too, watching his show.
Yeah, I remember it.
We thought he was so funny.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's cool.
You're going to have to be an editing.
I do that anyway.
Genius. You must be an editing genius to make this into
something. It takes
something.
me a long time, but generally I cut out long pauses, and I cut out every time I go or every time I go like.
Get rid of those for me if you could too.
Yeah, I do.
One time
I try to make it so the conversation flows.
I made a live album, and I kept some of my patter between songs, and I cut out about 80 times.
You don't know how many times you say it until you listen back.
It was insane.
And then you're like going, what the fuck is wrong with me?
Right. Me too.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it that I said it that many times.
I didn't either. And like. I mean, I don't do that as much, but more than I want to.
Yeah, you can see how people have to train that out of themselves to be a
broadcaster.
Speaker. Yeah.
I don't think I could do it.
Gosh, I did it so much. It was insane. Well, thanks for having me on it, man. I can't even imagine what it's going to be like because you're going to have to cut out a lot of things.
I'll cut out some stuff, but we're not going to name any names or anything like that. So we'll be cool.
I think it sounds great. What I heard was sounded great, so I think it'll be a really good
podcast.
Before I choose sides in a fight, I try to figure out what's right. I listen to both arguments before I put in my 2 cents. My 2 cents, my 2 cents. I spend a minute sitting on the fence. I weigh what I'm up against before I put in my 2 cents. If I can tell which one is right, I back them up with all my might. Draw on my experience before I put in my 2 cents. My 2 cents, my 2 cents. I spend a minute sitting on the fence. I weigh what I'm up against before I put in my 2 cents. sense, my 2 cents. I spend a minute sitting on the fence. I weigh what